Hey guys, it's Kurt from Worsey Club USA. Remember the other day we did a video called MIDI X2, I think that's what we called it. And what you see here is the back of our Worsey Sonic, and that we are using two MIDI out connections over to our Ketron SD40. What we didn't tell you in that video is that we changed some of the MIDI setup on the Ketron to match the Worsey side. So let's take a little bit closer look at that. One other thing we really should mention is, in case you haven't figured it out yet, N1, N2, each of those are 16 independent channels, and that's why we're able to do what we can do. Plus, there are two sound cards inside of the SD40, one behind each one of those connections. So that gives us essentially 16 MIDI channels down each of those connections and independent sound card or sound generation, so that there's no conflicts anymore. And again, that was our whole goal. Since you can't see the buttons that I'll be talking about in the video, let me just show them to you again real quick. This is right on the top right of the SD40. These are the physical buttons that I'll be pushing. All right, so let's take a look at how we're going to set things up on the SD40. So again, like I mentioned, you can't see the buttons, but we're hitting menu. And now we're going to hit MIDI. So what you see here is standard, computer sequencer, accordion, keyboard, a bunch of choices. And let's just leave it on standard for this discussion. If you look down at the bottom, notice there's other choices you can pick there. So if I click Arrange Your Keyboard out of interest, you can see this is the transmission. Notice on the right it says TX, so that's transmission. And all the channels are turned off except one. If you hit Receive, you can see all the channels are turned off except 16 and 15, and the global channel is set to 1. So let me back up, let me hit exit. So when you hit standard, that's the configuration that is set for you, okay? Now, what's important is that you can change that to be anything you want. You don't have to work with that or even pick a different one. So I'm gonna modify standard to be my Worsey setup, actually. And over on the right where it says keyboard style and voice, I'm gonna use that one when I'm just playing on a single keyboard controller, a Roland or our Native Instruments complete controller. So let's go ahead and click on Arrange Your Keyboard in standard. And what we want to do here is turn off. Actually, I'm going to leave 16 on for registration. We're going to come back and talk about that later. That's going to be the ability to change presets or registrations, I should say, on the SD40 from our Worsey. Now, mic and voice TR, I forgot what Voicetron. I'm not a singer, I'm not going to use a mic, so I'm going to turn off 15. And then down below, we're going to turn off global. And what's important here is that on the left for MIDI channel 2, we want that on. And that's going to marry back up to out of our Worsey on MIDI port 2 into the back of the Ketron on MIDI into the key B keyboard input. That's what we're basically mapping here, is how those channels work. So we want, we want channel 2 to be active so that when we play chord changes, the arranger section, or the styles, depending on what you want to call them, on the SD40 will respond. So now I'm going to hit the save button, and you get the option, notice, to save it, and that's going to replace the factory setting. And so this will be my new permanent standard setting. The other thing I want you to notice is there's a restore button there. So if you don't like this, or you want to put it back to the original factory setting, you just hit the restore button and it's right back to the way it was. So I'm going to hit save. And now if I go back in, just so you can see it, I hit Arrange Your Keyboard again. And sure enough, that is the new standard setting on my SD40. And I'll go back up system settings and stuff at a different time, like I showed you in the backup video. So now that we have the MIDI channels set up for our new configuration where we're using 2 MIDI ins on the Ketron and 2 MIDI outs on our Worsi, let me move the SD40 downstairs, hook it back up to the organ, verify that my settings are correct. And if you have not seen the Worsi video, we'll put a link up at the top of the video here that you can click on to watch that video that showed how we set up the Worsi side to send on both MIDI out 1 and MIDI out 2 so that we could have 16 dynamically assigned MIDI channels on the Worsi, picking up to 16 sounds on the Ketron, and then our harmony chord changes out on MIDI port 2. You might have noticed we mentioned our Worsi organ throughout this video a couple of times. And that is because we are building this as a custom MIDI configuration to work specifically with our SD40 and our Worsi Sonic organ. But what you should take away from that is the SD40 is very powerful and flexible, and you can build a MIDI configuration that'll work with just about anything, whether it's a digital piano, an accordion, a single keyboard MIDI controller. That's I guess, again, one of the other takeaways of the video. As always, thanks for watching.